If you were to put me in a lineup with Emily Ratajkowski, people would pick her as more beautiful or hotter or whatever than me. Are we placing value in the things that are going to help us thrive as a collective? Or are we getting stuck on these one-dimensional ways of viewing the world that are honestly antiquated and leave out so much of the full expression of what life could be? Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tea at TT's. It's been really cool to see your positive responses to the 75 Hard Content Creation Challenge. To everyone who's left a comment or watched, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't checked out that video, I will leave a link to it somewhere on the screen and in the description box. If you're listening to this on podcast app or anywhere that you're listening, to the audio, I'm publishing the audio a little bit later than the videos. Feel free to check out the video on YouTube. Otherwise, if I can, I'll link to the podcast episode where you can listen to that if you're interested. So many people, I feel like, in that video resonated with the psychological, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional aspects of how difficult it is to break into this industry. It got me thinking, and actually I've been personally reflecting on this a lot in my journaling. It's something that I come back to time and time again. And this morning when I was doing my journaling session, I got a little ping to talk about the topic of self-worth. I like this topic because I think when you hear the term self-worth, it can be a little generic, a little cliche, but I think self-worth is the pinnacle, the crux of everything that we do in life. And I think so much of our self-worth happens on autopilot, or I should say the beliefs and the narratives that we tell ourselves, the habits that form from those beliefs, the actions that we take consciously or subconsciously stem from our belief system and our self-worth system. If we want to do anything in life, especially chase our dreams, whether that's putting ourselves out there on the internet and creating content, whether that's finding the courage to leave a position that doesn't serve us anymore, go on dates and put ourselves out there in the romantic world, to leave a toxic relationship, it all stems down to our self-worth and our relationship with ourselves. So I think this is something that transcends, content creation. And I really believe, like I said, it's the crux of everything in life. The relationship we have with ourselves is so important. So I think it does deserve its own podcast episode video to sort of dissect. Now, that being said, I think a whole series on self-worth could be created. So if you have any specific questions, if you want me to dive into any specific topics, as always, please do feel free to leave comments. Let me know, shoot me an email. I love to get feedback from you all about what you're loving, what you're resonating with. My desire for these spaces is that it can be a community, a place where we can learn and grow and heal together. I take what you have to say seriously. That being said, I figured it might be easiest to dive into the topic of self-worth if we talk about my own journey with the subject matter first. I was definitely one of those people that didn't necessarily realize that her self-image, her self-worth came from very specific experiences, and that, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning of the video, I was operating on autopilot without even realizing that I had some really unhealthy narratives that I would tell myself. I had honestly a really unhealthy system with which I was operating as far as self-worth is concerned. And I think because I do identify as a high achieving, high performing individual, someone who is very goal oriented and driven, which is rooted in my self-worth, I didn't really realize how insidious and how calcified my self-worth system had become. Even saying that in and of itself, that I'm a high-achieving, goal-oriented individual is a narrative that I've constructed of my world, a perspective that I hold that is rooted in my self-worth. I saw from a very young age that there are very specific things that are idolized traumatized, whether it was in my family, in my society, through different experiences with my peers, just because of the certain level of, I'm going to use the word trauma because I think that it's valid in this situation. And I think that there are many different levels of trauma. I want to call a spade because of certain traumas that I went through in my life. I was really in survival mode, and I really adopted a lot of my thoughts around self-worth, a lot of my belief systems, because I needed to find a way to survive and move throughout the world. That meant I was avoiding catastrophe, fallout, heartbreak, devastation. Honestly, also on the opposite side of that coin meant that I was putting myself in situations to thrive and succeed. I know it sounds a little bit extreme when I say it, but I think that's because my operating system by default, because of all the things that I've sort of developed over the years, all of the habits, all of the stories, all of the actions as a result of the habits were that extreme. I think I developed a very black or white way of seeing. And I think I learned very quickly that you either succeed or you fail in life, depending on how quickly you can learn A, what the rules are, B, how quickly and how well you can follow those rules. The rules were sometimes explicitly given down to me, whether it was through generational beliefs and ideologies, cultures, and the environments that I grew up in, whether it was through traumatic experiences with peers. I learned very quickly what was right, what was wrong, and I tried to do my best to achieve all of the right things while pushing aside all of the things that I considered wrong or base, unpleasant or ugly or uninteresting. The way in which that I saw the world, and I still see the world a lot without proper recognition that I'm seeing the world this way, was black and white. You're either impressive or you're not. You're successful or you're not. You're beautiful or you're not. Wealthy or you're not. And I think this led to a lot of competitiveness, consciously and subconsciously, in lots of different environments. In school, I always tried to be smartest. I remember thinking that I was such a failure if I got below a certain ACT score, if I wasn't taking all of these classes, if I didn't get into some great schools. This was through the way I looked and the way I dressed. If I wasn't the most beautiful, if I wasn't the most put together, this was through talent shows. If I didn't make the talent show and I wasn't the best singer in the grade, to me it felt like failure. And I constantly sought these positions of what society and my peers and my parents and others deemed as the valuable things to aspire toward. You can imagine that when you cast such a big and gargantuan goal for yourself, anything below that feels like absolute failure. I think a really good example of this, and an example that is outside of high school and these sort of kind of cliche binaries, is even just the other day I was scrolling Instagram and I was thinking how shitty it is that nearly 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 times, if you were to put me in a lineup with Emily Ratajkowski, and if you don't know who this is, I'll put a picture of her up on the screen, people would pick her as more beautiful or hotter or whatever than me. And it got me in this headspin of honestly really shitty self-worth and decline and suffering. It's interesting because that might not even be true. On what basis have I founded this argument anyways? But it was something that I actively thought, and I think it's a really good example of just how pervasive my self-worth system was. It was either you're good or you're not, you're ahead or you're behind, you're successful or you're failing. So talking about how this sort of bled into content creation, I remember telling my therapist, I believe one of my biggest goals in life, my biggest lessons, spiritual lessons, is how brightly can I shine the truth of my own authenticity, my own light. That's why the lighthouse is such a pertinent symbol in all of my branding and everything I do. I've had visions since I was a kid about letting my light shine truthfully, authentically, unapologetically, but it's so hard for me because of this system in which I've been operating up until this point, up until, I was aware of it and began to heal it. How poetic is it then that my biggest goal, my biggest lesson in life is to be authentic and shine my light, regardless of if people like it, regardless of if it fits into a certain mold or category, that I want to do this job that is so dependent on how many likes I get if I'm doing things the way that everybody else sees as successful or beautiful. And it's been one of the toughest challenges for me to watch all of my friends have hundreds of thousands of followers, get brand deals, get people complimenting them in comments saying how stylish they are, how beautiful they are, how interesting they are, and to continue to try to just be myself in this process of creating content, regardless of having the external validation that I am on the right track or I'm doing the right thing. It has been single-handedly the hardest thing I've had to do, is to come back to myself and again restructure that system of self-worth that I learned so early on. Be my own best friend, show myself tenderness and grace and compassion, not only to be the person that I authentically feel I need to be, which means creating the content that I feel is most aligned to me, but also the emotional management of when something, let's say a post doesn't do well on Instagram, not taking it to heart and taking it as face value of you are uninteresting, you are worthless, you are not good at this career. Really, it's been this challenge of dusting myself off, picking myself back up, and trying again and again through every single post, through every single story, through every single YouTube video, through the low likes and the people not caring and the feeling like I'm not growing at the rate that I want to, reminding myself that my self-worth doesn't come from these external factors. It comes from fortified sense of self internally, being aware of the ways in which I'm viewing the world and if they are helping me or hindering me on my path to shine and be my truest, fullest expression of self. And so that's why I think self-worth in this conversation is worthy of being discussed in the first place, because so often we have formed these opinions and perspectives about the world, about ourselves, that aren't even necessarily true and by no means are helpful for our truest expression, but we default to them anyways because that's what we've been told. That's what we've done all along. That's the system in which we live. And especially on social media, where there are very clear-cut lines of beauty standards and influence standards, we need to be having conversations about why we're valuing these things in the first place, if they're good for not only our individual self-worth and sense of self, but our collective sense of self. Are we placing value in the things that are going to help us thrive as a collective, or are we getting stuck on these one-dimensional ways of viewing the world that are honestly antiquated and leave out so much of the full expression of what life could be? My system of belief was very black or white. I think this is the way a lot of people see the world. My self-worth came from how impressive I was. It came from how good I could be at playing the roles, which meant how good I could be at being what other people wanted me to be. And I think what people don't realize is that, sure, it's fun to be, or it's nice, I should say, to be this person that goes into a room and you can work it and you can play to other people's expectations of you, whether that's through how you look, what you say, how you relate to people. I think about that a lot and I'm like, why do people want to be around me specifically? I think I really needed to wake up to the idea that people wanted to be around me because I was what people expected of me. I played to their egos. I didn't talk about myself. I was polite. I knew the right things to say in certain situations politically, was impressive, and I had impressive things going on. I had built a company. I was working for an online magazine. Yeah, it buoys you, right? It buoys your self-esteem. But I think what we don't realize too is those things fluctuate constantly, the standard. And if we're constantly chasing this ideal of what other people expect of us, we can never fully be satisfied or satiated within ourselves. We're constantly going to be chasing the dragon's tail and working for something that will never fully be sustainable. And so at some point you have to ask yourself, what's it worth? Like, are you wanting some temporary satisfaction of knowing that you played the role of exactly who they expected you to be? Or do you want the long-term gratification gratification of pleasing yourself, knowing you said how you really felt in that moment. You showed up in that moment in the outfit that made you feel the best, not the one that you felt you looked the best in. The root of what I am trying to say, and the root of so much of the healing work that I do and what I've learned, is this idea that we cannot let our identities be defined. We cannot surely let our self-worth be defined by all of the external proof we pretend to find in other people, whether that's somebody being happy with us, somebody thinking we're successful, the house we own, the car we drive. We must, and it sounds cliche, but I think cliches are so often so because they're true. We must channel that energy internally, get really honest with ourselves about who we are, what we like, how we want to show up in the world, what we value, and continue to come back to that sense of self, that intuitive knowing, that quiet whisper at the center of our hearts time and time again. Because when you are not focused on bringing that energy internally, knowing yourself in that way, you can so easily be swayed by the outside world and its numbing tactics and its ways of seeing things. And I think this is the root of so much division and dissension in our world. It's because we're all chasing these things that we think are valued and powerful and beautiful and rich, and we're not actually listening to ourselves. We're just looking to everyone else for the next move to make or to tell us about who we are, what we can become in this world. And when we start to channel that energy internally, the relationship is very, very different. But people underestimate how hard it actually is to channel and to foster that sense of self-worth internally. I think in a world of a lot of people being asleep to the fact that they are operating on autopilot, to be aware and to be awake to the fact that you may not agree with the ways things are done, to the fact that you are a powerful internal being that honestly is made of the same stuff that everything else in this life is made up of. Yeah, it can be a very dangerous, insidious thing, and it's really difficult, and I think people underestimate that. You are inherently worthy. This is a belief that I have stuck to, and that when things get tough and when I lose all sense of direction, this really anchors me back into myself. And it goes back to what I just said. We are made of the same stuff everything else in life is. We are made of the same stuff God is. And whether you're spiritual or not, you don't have to identify with this. But if you believe that God created Adam, and then from Adam's rib he created Eve, that just means that we're all created from the same stuff. If you believe in the Big Bang Theory and that everything came from one little whatever, molecule, speck, explosion, it means we're all made of the same stuff. If you are spiritual and you like to believe that we're all made of stardust, it means we're all made of the same stuff. So that means that me and Emily Radikowski, we both have two eyes to see the world. We both have a heart that loves certain people in our lives. We both have qualities about us that are so beautiful and admirable, but also qualities about us that are so repulsive and so ugly, because unlike the system that I was operating in, not everything is black and white. It's not right or wrong. It's not you're beautiful or you're not. You're popular or you're not. You're smart or you're not. You are all of these things all at once. When we choose to cling to labels and titles and categories because we think that that's the right thing to do or that's the space that we feel safe in, we are negating 99% of the matter, the feelings, the expressions, the ways of being, the ways of showing up, the things you like that make life rich and worth living. I was journaling this morning, and one of the biggest challenges for me, I pulled the temperance card in tarot, which is a lot of times is about balance. I really love Tarot for Change by Jessica Dorr, because if you are somebody that doesn't resonate with tarot cards and the symbolism behind them, she really brings it down to this very sociological, psychological perspective and talks about things in a different way, which I really love. But her perspective of the temperance card is that we must transcend this black or white thinking if we are to ever transcend the suffering of our world. She argues that one of the most beautiful things we can do is dance in this gray area. Maybe that's why I intuitively chose to wear gray sweaters better today. It's when we can hold two truths at once. I am beautiful and I can be ugly. I am intelligent and sometimes I don't know. I am healing and I still have so much to heal. That gives us so much more spaciousness to get quiet, to quiet the noise of the outside world that tells us this is how you need to be, this is what you need to believe, this is who you need to be valued in life. And we can instead start listening intuitively to ourselves, because if we are made of the same stuff that everyone else is, if we have the same potential to achieve our dreams, to find success, to find happiness, to find wealth on our own terms, then we have everything in us to make decisions that are best for ourselves and our journey and our healing. I made a TikTok the other day about how triggers are there for a very pointed reason. People trigger us, whether through jealousy or admiration or saying something that hits a nerve with us, because it is something internally that says, actually declares, we're not okay with what's going on here, and we need to be aware of what it is so that we can actually learn and grow and become more of who we are meant to be. These things in life we think are happening outside of us, but it's all just happening internally, and always for our highest good, to bring us more into alignment with the natural flow of God and the universe, to bring us more into alignment with our highest self, with love. And I know this might feel a little bit transcendent and weird, but I think if you think about what I am actually saying, you'll recognize that there is so much truth to this in whatever way that it finds you, right? I'm not saying that what I'm saying is right and what you believe is wrong. I'm saying that when you resonate with something that I am saying, there is truth there, and it is palpable and recognizable, and you're resonating with this because something in you is saying, I'm not okay with the way that I've been finding my self-worth previously. I'm not okay with doing things by other people's rules. If you're looking for applicable, concrete ways to reinforce this worthiness, to try and quiet the noise of the outside world and listen to your intuitive true north, I do have a couple of resources for you that I'll leave you with as takeaways, because like I said, we could get so deep into this. I could go round and round in circles talking about it because it's so important. But I would encourage you, if you're watching this video, you are already awake to the fact, you are already standing in rebellion to the way that you have been doing things previously. You're saying, I'm not okay with finding my self-worth in whatever way that I was before, and I'm ready to learn and heal and grow. First and foremost, I think give yourself a little pat on the back, because that takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-awareness. You're already doing the work. Simple as that. Second, I would say there are some practices to take you internally. I think it's so important to say, okay, I'm impacted by my outside world, but I also have this intuitive, internal, true north navigation system that if I quiet the world around me enough, will talk to me and will guide me every single time. Some things that help me do that: meditation. I know you're not going to want to hear it, but giving yourself 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, whether it's yoga nidra, whether it's Tony Robbins priming exercise, whether it's 5 minutes of gratitude, whether it's 5 minutes of affirmation, getting quiet and coming back to yourself so that you're not constantly infiltrated by the noise of the outside world is so much more valuable than people give it credit for. It's not just to relax you and soothe your mind. It's so that you can actually hear what's yours and what somebody else's and how you want to proceed from that place. Journaling, you guys know I love to write. I love to journal. It helps me visually and audibly hear the difference between myself and these rules that I have made for myself, this autopilot that I'm looping on. When I was in therapy, this was a couple of years ago now, we talked about how hard I can be on myself and how self-critical. This was the operating system of black and white that I was, using before. And my therapist encouraged me to name that person and to draw it. And it was this very judgmental female. She had pearls around her neck, kind of Stepford Wivey, and I called her Marion. So when I'm journaling, it allows me to really distinguish, was that decision something that I made from my intuitive highest self, or was that Marian snipping at me saying that if you don't create content in this way, you're not going to be interesting, you're going to be obsolete, you're never going to grow, and you're going to be left behind. Sounds harsh, but that's literally how harsh it is in my head sometimes. Again, affirmation is a great way to do that. When I'm pinning my 30 minutes a day for the 75 hard challenge, a lot of times I will listen to subliminals and affirmations just to infiltrate my mind with something outside of the doom and gloom and chaos of the outside world. I'm not saying that this is an encouragement to you to bury your head in the sand, but sometimes you just need to quiet that so that you can return to your own sense of true north, so that you can calm your nervous system and figure out what is the best way to approach how to show up on social media when we're talking about the heated political landscape. What is the best way for me to show up to how I approach eating and my diet and my exercise? Sometimes you need to quiet all the other channels to listen to your own internal channel. I think another way that you can sort of reinforce worthiness is to paint the picture of your vision and to constantly reinforce this. You can call this your why, defining your values. I always say in my journal, I am moving towards what's precious. And it's because you can get so distracted in life. You can value making $1 million, but why are you valuing making $1 million? Is it because there's a part of you that wants to afford a lifestyle that is $1 million, or is it because your friend makes $1 million and you think that's what you need to do? Really come back to your own unique version, your own unique vision of what your highest expression of life is. And the way that you define that, if you're like, how do I know what I want, is to be your own best friend. Take yourself out on a date, go do things that you like, romanticize life, whether that's getting outside and breathing fresh air, painting. It could be as simple as listening to the song that you want in the car as loud as you want to. Because I talked about this in a TikTok too. That was something else that I wouldn't do because I was so afraid of how other people viewed me. It wasn't cool enough, or it wasn't X, Y, and Z. Get so comfortable with being with yourself and giving yourself exactly what you need, and you'd be surprised at how quickly that vision comes to you about what you want your life to be. And when that vision is clear, you make decisions so much more fluidly. You say, do I want to eat this thing? If I want to eat it, I'm going to eat it. But if I'm eating it because I think it's going to make me skinny and I have this ideal of what thinness is and what beauty is, we need to investigate those things. Remind yourself of your own vision in life. Do that through getting comfortable and familiar with who you are, what you like, and who you're meant to be. Get curious. I know we have kind of dove in deep really quickly, partly because I am on a time crunch. I'm supposed to be at a dinner reservation, but also because I can get so passionate and inspired about this topic. And like I said, we could go every which way and talk about self-worth because there are so many different angles. And taking it back to what I said at the beginning, it is the crux of everything. But if there is nothing else that you leave today's video or recording with, I hope it's that you are inherently worthy just by being born, just by being who you are. You are worthy of every good thing you want in this life, and don't let anybody try and tell you differently. And B, I think we need to start waking up to the ways in which we are viewing the world and operating within it and deciding, is this mine or is this somebody else's? And start doing the work to heal that relationship and make it more of the former. As always, thank you for listening to me. I know this is deep, heavy stuff, but we're in it together. Everybody is dealing with the same questions, turning their wheels, whether they want to admit to it or not. We're all just humans trying to figure life out. Know that I am here. Thank you for coming into my little slice of the internet. It means more to me than I can express. We are healing, we are growing, we are changing. Until the next tea at TT's, we'll see you soon. Take good care.